Hello, everybody. Welcome to BCCO's Monday rehearsal. We're going to give a few minutes before, sorry, we're going to give a few minutes to allow people to join up. So we'll just sit here for a little while. But I hope your week has been okay. It's been a little drizzly. Um, I've been spending a lot of the time actually back at the piano when I don't have as much time to actually do that. And so I've been pulling up all the old things I used to play. And so I've been posting up to Instagram a little bit more, but we're excited today because we're going to have not only Paul and Julia join us again to do warm-ups and some musical ideas. We're also going to have Rebecca Wishnia, who also plays with the BCCO Orchestra, and her fiance, Paul, who's going to join in to, Doug. And they're going to join in and play something for us. So I think that's going to be a lot of fun. So we'll have to welcome them in a little bit. So we'll just give a couple more minutes, but I've been working up something that I used to play with San Francisco Ballet for a gala, and this was part of a ballet, but isn't it romantic? And it's a jazz version of it. But it was one of the first times I played jazz with a combo, and actually I was really nervous about it because it's a completely different world for me, and I was talking to the drummer and he said it's just all about communication the entire time. You know, what sort of style you bring to it, what your personality is, being in the moment. And it was a very new experience because I know how to connect to musicians as in chamber music and of course in orchestra. But I think for jazz, it's a completely different thing and very improvisatory from moment to moment. And so when we were in rehearsal and when we played it for the shows, it actually was very, very different. But might as well play. I'm going to this might be terrible, but I'm going to try to play some of it and see if it comes across just while we're waiting here. So maybe the sound deliberately might be not too good just to make sure that my notes can be hidden a little bit. But okay, while we wait this for maybe a minute or two, and then we'll get started after that. So, okay. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna try to play that again another week so I can salvage myself a little bit and maybe play a little bit, a few more of the notes. But in any case, so as we mentioned, we're really excited for this Monday's BCCO gathering because we not only have Paul, who's going to be playing a sing-along for us at the end and some piece of his, another piece at the end, and also Julia, who's going to lead us in some vocal exercises, etc. We also have Rebecca and Doug, who are instrumentalists, and Rebecca plays with BCCO often and some of my other organizations, and they're both musicians in the Bay Area that perform quite a bit, so they're going to join us a little bit later too. But I wanted to start off with with a recording actually of one of my favorite vocal ensembles, and a post that they actually just released at the beginning of isolation and everything being shut down. And it's this really wonderful group called Voces 8. And they are a group out of England. And they had noted that because of everything going on, we forget that even some of the most prestigious groups out there are having difficulty because they make their living, obviously, from touring and from performing. And to suddenly have that completely cut out of their lives and their livelihood, it's a very difficult. Hold on just one second. I think Christian is actually going to be posting this, but it's a piece that they by Frank Ticelli called Earth Song, and the text is see. I'm going to read the text first, and then we're going to play it. Let me see. It's sing, be, live, see. This dark, stormy hour, the wind it stirs, the scorched earth cries out in vain. O war and power, you blind and blur, the torn heart cries out in pain. But music and singing have been my refuge, and music and singing shall be my light. A light of song, shining strong, alleluia. Through darkness, pain, and strife, I'll sing, be, live, see. Peace. And they released this recording specifically because of isolation. And they are an incredible group that has such precision, not only in intonation, but just articulation and sort of the breath and phrasing that they have. So I think that Christian is going to start playing this and this recording that they just released. Ah, that's such a gorgeous, gorgeous work. So, if you don't know that group Voces 8, there you should check them out on YouTube because they're I think, one of the top a cappella choruses around. And oftentimes, choruses nowadays, or vocalists and pop singers and artists, they have the ability to sort of adjust the intonation of their pieces, and sometimes engineers actually go around doing that. And if you do orchestra concerts, they'll adjust it so that all the pizzicatos happen at the same time together. And vocalists, you can actually change the intonation so it actually is more in tune. However, groups like Voces 8 are so incredible because they don't need any of that. They have sort of a precision of the way they pronounce and they enunciate the vowels. The balance that they have, oftentimes it's not necessarily the intonation that you have, but it's the balance between the voices that'll cause the chord to not settle and it doesn't sound in tune, but actually the notes are in tune. It's just the balance. And also, as I mentioned, just the way they attack every single note. You can hear all the words so clearly because they really pronounce and enunciate the consonants so precisely and cleanly and in the same manner. And so some of the things that we do in rehearsal for BCCO are to try to what we call unify the vowels, because we all speak in a slightly different way. We all might come from different places with different enunciations and accents. We might have different ways of pronouncing certain vowels or whatnot. And the vocal technique is built around trying to not only allow us to create a more full and rich sound while we sing, but also to try to unify the vowels. So when we sing together, that we can have that sort of same precision when it comes to the vowel production and same precision when it comes to intonation. Because the same thing happens if you have different vowels sung the same vowel sung different ways. It'll actually sound a little bit out of tune if they're not quite pronounced the same way. If the sound is too far back in your throat, then it sounds a little bit dark and covered and often can come across flat. And if it's a little bit too bright, then it can not have the richness that allows us to tune the chords together. And so I want you to hear not only Voces 8 because they're such an incredible group, but also because it sort of highlights sort of the ideal that we work towards when we started singing an ensemble. We want the vowels to be open. We want them to be forward and have a lot of ping to it. We want them to have sort of a uniformity of how we pronounce it. Light, light, light. The word light can be pronounced, sung three different ways, and we want to try to do that all in the same way, so we tune with each other. I also want to do one thing before we switch over to Julia to do a warm-up. But we talk in rehearsal often about trying to raise the third of the chord, or make sure the intonation of the root of the chord is strong, and that the fifth of the chord. And I want to just do a little bit of demonstration. I'm going to see if you can see the keyboard here. But if you're doing this and you have a scale, right? Like we all know. You can number those notes on the scale, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, which is the same as 1, right? And what we do is that the chords are built around these triads, these groups of 3 notes. 1, 3, 5, right? And you can have the same chord, but in what we call different positions. So instead of the 1, the root being on the bottom, you could have the third being on the bottom, 3, 5, 1, or 3, 5, 8. Or you can have the fifth be on the bottom, 5, 1, 3, right? And you see all the same chords, but they have very different functions. And the note that's on the bottom, the root, the third, or the fifth, that can make a big difference in how we approach the note. Because basses, for instance, love singing the roots of chords because it grounds the chord in such a really nice, rich way. But if they're singing the third of the chord, then we have to rebalance, because those that actually sing the root of the chord need to be stronger. And so when we're singing, the idea is to try to figure out what function of note are you singing? Are you singing the third? Are you singing the fifth? Are you singing the root? When I was first starting out singing, I used to try to sing in my head 3 blind mice. That used to tell me that was a third of the chord. If I was singing 3 blind mice, oh, that's a third of the chord. That's a third of the chord right there. And it's really funny. As I've mentioned in orchestra rehearsals, in rehearsals for orchestra, orchestras actually tend to tune the third too high. And so you actually have to tell them, for some orchestras, you have to say, hey, the third is a little high, you need to come down. And for singing, exactly the opposite. We want the thirds to be high, high, high. And so when we build the chord, for intonation, you want the root of the chord first. So all the voice parts that are singing that, let's say C major, all the people that are singing C need to be strong and together. And then what we do is we build it by putting the fifth there. And this is a chord that you often hear. It's called an open fifth chord. It doesn't have what we call a quality to it. It doesn't have major or minor. It's open fifth. And that sort of purity of an open fifth is where we got sort of the chant, Gregorian chant, we hear those fifths, and we can tune those fifths like the violin or stringed instruments are tuned in fifths. You can tune those very clearly because it has a very clear open sound. And then only after you get the first and the fifths together, the root and the fifths together, do you add the third in. And like we mentioned before in rehearsals a billion times, when you have the third of the chord, not only does that need to be actually slightly softer because we want the root and the fifth to be the strongest, but you want that third to actually ride pretty high. So the intonation never sags. And for vocalists, because we sing in a different area, we want to sing with the hard parts of our head, the bone resounding, and not the soft tissue of our throat. We don't want to sing with the soft palate. We want the hard palate to resound, our cheekbones to resound. So we bring the tone of the voice up into the forward part of your mouth. You want that. The more we sit back, the flatter it becomes. And that's where we speak. And so when we speak every day, we speak in the back of our throats. Americans do especially. And when we sing, we want to bring it forward. And so oftentimes choirs stereotypically, will sing flat. And so we, especially for the third, we wanted to make sure that's high. Not only do we have to counter our natural singing, the natural tendency to sing flat because we're using different part of our head, or focusing the sound in a different part of our head. We also want to make sure that the function of the chord is the third. If it's the third, that you need to make sure that's even higher. So you have two things that make it the note want to be higher. Not only the vocal production, but also the function. And so try that next time we sing a chord, is to sing, for me, again, my first experience with it was really just singing three blind mics. If I sang like, the three blind mice. Oh, I'm singing the third. Okay, I need to make sure that rides high, that we're going to sing that quite high. But when you sing a chord, generally for a voice, unless we're doing really complex chords, there's always going to be one voice part on the root, always a voice part on the fifth, probably, a voice part that's on the third. And so trying to identify and be aware of your note's function in the chord actually has a lot to do with intonation. It's one of the reasons why Voces 8 is so magnificent. It's because every single chord, they don't have to sit there and say, oh wait, you know what, for this note, you have to be a little sharper, you have to be a little flat. They know instinctually at this point with all their training that the function of their notes at a certain point of the chord, and they automatically make those adjustments in their ear and with the balance with the 8 of them. And they're a really fantastic group. I actually emailed them and said, because we're virtually now, would you like to come work with BCCO and do a little session? And they said, that's fantastic. We would love to do that. It is 3 o'clock in the morning, England time, when we are rehearsing at California time, 7 o'clock. So they're going to see if one of their members might be willing to get up to hold a session with us at 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm not too hopeful about that, but given the fact that now this is virtual, we can have guests from all over the world, in fact, it's an opportunity to try to reach out to some of those people. So when you sing along to these pieces, or you sing along to a solo song, you can even try to see what is the function of that chord, and then try to see how to best tune that chord to the chords that are underneath or to the other voice parts that are singing with you, because that makes a huge difference in terms of how you approach it. Well, you know that when you do music, and Bach did it with the well-tempered clavier, that the piano is actually slightly out of tune equally on all notes, right? All notes in relation to each other. And so, they used to have tuning methods where single keys actually were more in tune than other keys. And so when Bach came out with the well-tempered clavier, it was for an instrument that was actually tuned with a slightly imperfect intonation all the way through. And so when we sing, And when we perform with instruments or whatnot, we can actually tune those chords more precisely than a piano can actually play. And that's where we're looking for. Not only the vocal production, producing the vowels and consonants in the same manner, figuring out the balance of the notes between each other, but also trying to figure out the function of the chord, of the note within the chord, to make sure that the adjustment of the chord itself is in tune with itself, in addition to obviously all the other notes. So that's something that we can always work on. But one of the key parts to that is having clean vocal production. And so I'm going to turn it over to Julia, who's going to give us do a nice full warm up. And it's sometimes difficult because when you're singing in a group, it's easy to be able to lose yourself and say, I'm just going to sing freely and clearly. And we heard a couple of comments that, people standing in the middle of their living rooms, it feels a little weird because they're not surrounded by the sound. And that's something that we dearly miss, is to be engulfed and embraced by the sounds of your neighbors and your friends singing with you. But know that even though you do this, and maybe the only person you can hear is you or Julia speaking to you, that this is a wonderful exercise, and that there are over 130 people, I think 135 people, that are all joining in together to do that. And so at least within spirit, that we are doing these vocalizes together. So Julia, I'm going to hand it over to you, and we will have a warm up led by Julia.
Hi. Let's see. I think actually right before I go, I believe that Julie Frickman has a very short announcement. So I'm going to leave my video off and hand it over to Julie for a moment.
Oh, great. Julie, are you there?
I am. Christian.
Great.
But can you?
I can hear you.
That's wonderful. Christian? Well, I'm just going to keep talking here. And I bet Christian's going to get a picture on here in just a moment. Let me see, maybe I can do that. Nope. Well, anyway, this is Julie. I'm your volunteer coordinator, and oh, wait a minute, start my video. Here we go. There we go. Hi, everybody. On behalf of the board, it is my pleasure to announce the volunteer of the semester for spring 2020. We do this every semester, and we didn't want to skip this one. So let's just jump in. Quiet and unassuming, this chorus member astounds us with her smart, organized, and thoughtful approach to getting things done. She was a very effective member of the Street Requiem team and couldn't be a more pleasant work partner. Over the past year, she's coordinated a chorus activity that goes largely unnoticed. As coordinator of concert program, stuffing, and cleanup, she has quietly led a crew of 10 to 15 volunteers who insert donation envelopes into 1,300 programs for each concert series right before the Friday and Saturday concerts. Then she delivers the programs to the ushers just in time for audience distribution. After the concert, her volunteers sweep the auditorium for those extra programs and envelopes for future use. Her determination to ensure that the stuffing and timely delivery of the programs happens results in approximately $3,000 to $4,000 in donations for each concert series. Dedicated volunteers return with each concert to stuff programs under her competent leadership. This vital job, unseen by most, directly reaches our audience. Her quiet perseverance and on-target feedback about the process have resulted in a smoothly run and successful operation. And that's not all. For many years, she's opened her house for multiple sectionals whenever asked. BCCO is delighted to honor alto Becky Osborne Coolidge as volunteer of the semester for spring 2020. Becky, congrats. I can hear the applause coming through the Okay. Congrats, Becky. Julia, back to you. Thank you.
Okay, hello, congratulations, yay! Okay, so let's sing a little bit. Based on, let's see, just to reiterate why we warm up in the first place. It's not that your voice necessarily it's not necessarily that your voice is like cold or anything, and you know, because it's inside your body, it doesn't need to warm per se. But I think warming up is a really nice chance for you to really think about and become conscious of your breathing, your voice, your posture, you know, how you're sitting, where you're feeling tense, and getting really in contact with your body and your voice, what's working today, what's not working today. So let's become conscious of our voices. First, either stand or finding really good sitting position. So if you are staying seated, that you are sitting kind of at the front of your chair, and your feet are kind of flat on the floor. And if you're standing, make sure that your feet are hip width apart, and you're expanding and lifting your ribs off of your hips. And let's start with some shoulder rolls, actually, to get some tension released. I've noticed since spending so much time at home that I'm spending a lot more time hunched over the computer, in a chair watching TV, knitting and hunched over like this, you know, spending time doing things that doesn't require me to necessarily sit up with nice posture. So now that we have our shoulders rolled, now let's also bring our head to one side so that you are stretching your neck here. And not only are you pulling your head down, but you're also pulling your opposite shoulder down so that you can get an optimum stretch right through here. You should feel it all the way through here. Take a couple of nice deep breaths. Release some tension. I can tell you're holding tension in your jaw. Release that tension in your jaw. And very slowly roll your head over across your chest over to your other side. And same thing. So you are pulling your head down and your opposite shoulder down. So you're getting a really good stretch here. Excellent. And now let's bring our head back up to center, and let's do our favorite stretch, the cactus. So bring your arms up all the way up for a second, and then you can bring it down into your cactus position. And I always imagine, actually, while I'm doing this, that it's not just the focus on the arms, but I'm actually focusing on my shoulder blades when I bring my arms down. And I'm imagining that my shoulder blades are coming from the up position and being kind of just slid into my back pocket. And then if you lean back just a little bit, it'll give a really nice, good gravity stretch to your whole chest and your collarbone and everything. And take a couple of nice deep breaths in this position and feel open and happy and ready to sing, because here we go. Okay, let's bring our arms down. And actually, before we start singing, let's do just a couple of breathing exercises. So box breathing, as we've called it before. So you'll breathe in for 4 beats, hold for 4 beats, breathe out for 4 beats, hold for 4 beats, and then repeat. So it's just this nice box that we're doing. And while you're breathing, I want you to think on each breath, think about a different area of your body that's moving. So maybe the first time you're focusing on, instead of breathing into your chest here, you're focusing on expanding your stomach. And then maybe the second time you're thinking about expanding your sides. Maybe the third time you're thinking about expanding through your back, that kind of thing. So you're focusing on where in your body that you're feeling your breath so you can get connected to a nice, low, deep breath. So here we go. Excuse me. Ready, and breathe in. 2, 3, 4. Hold. 2, 3, 4. Out. And hold. And in, and hold, and out, and hold. Different space of the body, and in, and hold, and out. This is the last one, and hold, and breathe normally. Excellent. So hopefully, as you're focusing on your breathing, hopefully you're focusing on centering yourself as well and really pushing your breath down and out. As Ming says, that sack of potatoes that just drops and goes everywhere. Front, back, side, all axes. Okay, great. So now let's do some panting to get aware of your diaphragm. So pant with me just for like 5 minutes. I know it's going to be really strange to be in the middle of your living room alone panting in a room, but just for 5 seconds and just get really, really in contact with your diaphragm. So here we go. Great. Okay, so now a little bit more controlled version of that, and repeat after me. Excellent. So hopefully with that, you're feeling some kind of control and some diaphragmatic bounce that was happening. And that will really kind of help and support you, especially through these next staccato exercises that we're going to start out with. So here we go. Hopefully my balance with the piano will be fine. So here's a new exercise that we haven't done before. Hepa, hepa, hepa. So you should be focusing on 2 diaphragm punches per note. I'll sing it again. Hepa, hepa, hepa. So I'm punching my diaphragm with the H and also with the P. Hepa, hepa, hepa. Okay, try it with me. Ready? And hepa, hepa, hepa. 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 Nicely done. Okay, and we'll go back down here. And one more staccato exercise. And this time, instead of stepwise, we're going to do a triad. So hepa, 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 hepa. And really see if you can get that disengagement or detachment in between each note, or even within one note, right? In between syllables. Hepa, 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 hepa. So there's lots of light and lots of space, right, in between each note. And just imagine that you're just shooting out puffs of air with each hep-ah. Ready, 2, 3, go. Hepa, 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 hepa. 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 Last one. Hepa, 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 hepa. Nicely done. Okay, and now just take a nice deep breath and sigh from the top of your range down and great. And now we're going to do the exact opposite. So that was staccato work and lots of punches of your diaphragm and lots of space in between each note. And now we're going to do the opposite and try to sing legato. And everything should just be on one constant source of breath. So here we go. Here's our exercise. Yo. Ready, go. Yo. 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 Great, we're going to stop there for 1 second. We're going to continue with that exercise, but just let's talk about it for a little bit. So if you're thinking about the staccato exercises that we just had a moment before, imagine that you're making raviolis with that. So there's space in between each piece. But with legato singing, you have just one long string of spaghetti and there's no interruption ever. It's just one constant stream of air. You can also think about like filling up a balloon with your breath, and then as you exhale, you're pushing air out of the balloon, and it has to be one nice consistent stream of air. So we're not singing yo, oh, 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 right? So there aren't individual pulses on each note. But see now, focus a little bit more on your breath exhalation and your breath use, and see if you can focus on just one constant stream of air. Don't think about changing the pitch so much as you're thinking about connecting the notes. What helps me too is to think that you're crescendoing as you're going downwards, right? So crescendo as you continue through the phrase, and that will help you connect it a little bit. So let's try that exercise one more time, thinking about that. Ready, and yo, yo, last one. Nicely done. Okay, and now we're going to do a vowel flow. So some of the vowels, as Ming was talking about, the type of vowel that you sing, especially in an ensemble setting, really affects your pitch. But even as like a soloist, as you're singing, the type of vowel that you're singing and the way that you sing a vowel also, like no matter what context you're singing, it affects whether or not you're flat or sharp or right on, or like it affects the way that your sound comes across, right, and your intonation. So let's do a couple of extremes. So sing with me just kind of as nasally as possible. We're gonna do that again because I didn't give you a warning. One more time, but as nasally as possible. Don't be afraid to make it ugly sounding. And really, really bright, really forward, just as nasal as possible. Ready, go. So hopefully you felt your sinuses clearing up a little bit there, as I did mine. And now the exact extreme opposite. So make it as deep and in the throat as possible, so it's nice and dark. Ready, go. If you noticed also while listening to that and singing with that, the nasally one was very bright forward and had lots of ping to it, but the one that was kind of in the back of the throat sounded almost muffled comparatively. So now thinking about those two extremes, you want to find, right, the kind of happy middle point. So you still want that forward ping, but you want a little bit of cavernous space to give it a nice warm sound as well. So now finding that kind of middle space. Oop, right key, ready, go. Great, excellent. Let's talk about one more thing in relation to that exercise as well before we continue with it. I'm going to do something extremely unflattering on video, but it gets this point across. So if you notice, when I sing all of these first vowels, the only thing that you have to do to change the vowels is move your tongue. So for example, I'm going to do it a little bit closer, you can see. So hopefully you saw that the tongue was really the only thing that was moving, not my jaw. So you can really set your jaw in one position and do all of those changes just with your tongue. And that will also help keep the sound and the vowel kind of in the same place of your mouth as well. So let's start here. Ready, go. warming down a little bit. So we're going to start here and just sing a nice, comfortable yaw. But see if when you descend in note, try not to descend or change your register as much. So it's a little bit more noticeable if I start a little bit lower. So for example, if you can hear yaw, I start kind of in my head voice and then I pop it down to my chest voice. Just for the purpose of this exercise, see if you can keep everything in a nice light space. So we'll start up here, so where it's a little bit more comfortable, and just sing it all in that same register, in that same head space, as much as possible. Ready, go. Yaw, 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 yaw. And keep going. Keep going if you can. Last one. Excellent. I think it's bound to happen where you have to kind of jump registers at a certain point. But just for the purpose of being able to control your voice and being able to choose when you want to be in which register, right? It's important to try these exercises where you challenge yourself and say, I'm going to try and stay in my head voice for as low as I possibly can before I kind of have to switch, right? Okay, so we'll do one more familiar exercise, and that's our nice scale exercise. So we'll start here and we'll sing the yaw that we're all familiar with. See if you can set your yaw vowel immediately and keep it in that same place. So know that even though you're starting down here, you're about to very quickly pop up to here. Right, so know that you have to make that high space when you start at the very bottom of your register here. So my piano skills are not great today, but that's okay. Here we go. 1, 2, ready, go. Yaw. Okay, so that's it for vocal warm-ups today, but I hope you enjoyed singing with everybody who's singing with us today. And also see if you can try and sing some vocal warm-ups just a little bit every day. I think whenever you sing, it always makes you feel happier. So just spend like 5 or 10 minutes a day trying to sing something, even if it's just a vocal warm-up. And it was great to see you all, or speak to you all.
Yeah. I asked, I hope you enjoyed the warm up. I asked Julia actually to talk a little bit about what grad school auditions were like for conductors, because, she and I actually had been meeting a while in advance of the auditions because they're very rigorous. And as I think she alluded to in some of our last rehearsals we had together, the amount of repertoire, because she was invited to so many auditions, but the amount of repertoire that she had to learn was quite intense. I've asked Julia to talk a little bit about. You can see bedtime comes very, very soon in my household. I asked Julia to talk a little bit about what grad school auditions were like and what type of things they asked, because I think it's very interesting, sort of how they gauge in a day or two if they'd like to train somebody for a few years. So, Julia.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a lot of things to say about this process, so I'm going to try to be as succinctly descriptive as possible. I was actually thinking when Ming asked me to talk about this tonight, I was just thinking that I was just on a phone call with like my undergrad conducting professor earlier this week and talking specifically about how this process all went. And that, you know, our phone conversation was like 2 hours on this one topic. So there's a lot of things to say, but I'll try to be as concise as possible. So I just want to talk briefly about the actual application process in December. You know, applying to 7 different schools seems kind of like the average, especially for like students that are applying to undergraduate schools these days. Like I think when I was applying for college, I applied to like 10 or more schools, and I think that's honestly the average these days. But they have this thing called the Common App where you can send in like one essay for all 10 schools and just kind of work on that common application for all of those 10 schools, right? But for this application process to these 7 schools that I chose, there was no common application. So it meant 7 different submissions, and each school asked for a different combination of essays. So each school had a different essay prompt that they wanted me to think about and write about. They asked for video submissions, and again, they asked for like, some schools only asked for rehearsal footage, some schools only asked for performance footage, some schools asked for a combination, some schools asked for like contrasting pieces. So it was really kind of like you couldn't just put together one portfolio and send it to all of these different schools. You had to spend the time to put together a different portfolio per submission. And then on top of all of that, they also wanted a resume and a repertoire list. So that was just a lot to pull together for that process. And then they use that to select and call back individuals. So they watch your videos, and they asked usually for about like 15 minutes of video. So if you ever saw me setting up a video camera at any BCCO rehearsal, now you know why. So once I submitted, I had to wait 3 or 4 weeks of just kind of waiting to hear back while they made that decision process, and watched everyone's videos. And so I heard back about like the last week of December or the first week of January about all of the callbacks that I got to come on campus. And they then assigned me pieces to start learning. So each school that I got a callback for, I assigned approximately, like on average, 2 pieces. Some assigned 3, like 1 or 2 assigned 1. So, but on average, it came to about 2 songs or 2 pieces per school that I had to prepare, you know, with the idea that I would be rehearsing and working with their chorus on campus. And then they also asked me to prepare a vocal solo, and then also to prepare something on the piano, which was particularly fun for me. But I have, let's see, the repertoire list here of everything that I had to learn. So there was a piece written in 2018 that had a lot of meter changes. That was relatively recent. There was Brahms' Requiem, 4th movement, which was really nice to already kind of have under my belt and in my repertoire. Let's see, Ives' 67th Psalm, a selection of Haydn's creation. Let's see, Britain War Requiem, the Quam Olim Abrahe fugue, and since many of you sang that, you'll remember the Quam Olim Abrahe promisisti et semini eius. So that was very fun as well. Let's see, Morton Lauridsen, Midwinter Songs, Movement 4, Brahms' Requiem again, Movement 1 this time, and then Poulenc Gloria, Movements 1 and 6. Both, if you don't know that piece, it has a lot of meter changes, which is I think why they chose that piece. They wanted to see how a conductor could get through all of the meter changes. Another couple of pieces written by current composers. So Jake Runestad, Alleluia, Rina Esmail Tutorana, Mozart Requiem, also both the Hostias and the Quam Olim Abrahe fugue. So that's a lot of repertoire that I had to learn for all of those schools. And it's really interesting. Once you got to the school, the audition day was usually just 1 day. And so they would structure it where you had an interview in the morning that was anywhere from 30 to 50 minutes. And I say interview because it wasn't so much a like talk and discussion based thing, but it was more, some schools wanted to have a conducting lesson with you to see how well you would theoretically work with your potential mentor. And some schools wanted to put you through some musicianship exercises to see where you're at. Some schools wanted you to do some score ID. So they put down like 12 different scores and asked you to have a conversation with them about, what composer you think wrote it, what time period it belongs to. So that was kind of in the morning, usually a 30-minute to a 50-minute period. And then in the afternoon, you usually had anywhere from 12 minutes to 20 minutes with a chorus where you rehearse the piece that you prepared for the ensemble, which was actually what I was most scared for, because I was thinking, how do you work with a choir that you've never worked with before? But it's, Ming was kind of also helping me through that. Well, you prepare the piece as you would, as if you were working with BCCO, but you have to know the notes. You have to know how you want it to sound, but then you also have to be prepared to listen to exactly what they're giving you, which you need to do anyways when you're working with any chorus. And then listen to what they give you and want to give you innately, and what musically they want to do innately as an ensemble. And then compare that to what you wanted to happen. Did anything overlap? What didn't overlap? And then what can you change in the time that you have with them? So that was kind of what they wanted to see in the time that you had with them. And then they usually, after that, gave you like a short 45-minute exam on either music history or score identification, or like a Bach chorale dictation or something like that. So that was the process.
That's great. Thank you, Julia.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about one of my grad school audition experiences, because it was the most bizarre. I had gone into the interview that Julia had mentioned, and sometimes that interview involves, for me, it was an orchestra audition. Involves the orchestra, sometimes it's just with a conducting teacher. And so when I walked in the room, the current grad student had a tuner, and he stuck it in my face, and he played an A for me. He went, bah! And it was like, nice to meet you too. Okay, that's great. And so I proceeded to have a whole conversation with the grad school professor and the grad assistant. And after about 20 minutes of an interview, he said, okay, I would like you to start conducting Beethoven Symphony No. 1. And at some of the other schools, you worked with the ensemble. And so I said, okay, so is it going to be in the rehearsal room? He's like, no, right here, right now. And I realized that there wasn't going to be a rehearsal with the ensemble at all. It's just going to be in front of them. And so, I started conducting. Bum, bum, and for a while. And then you say, stop. What instruments should you be focusing on right now? I said, well, I knew the clarinets and the oboes have a lovely 16th note melody there. And he said, sing it back to them the way you want it to be sung. I said, he said, no, those are the wrong pitches. And then the grad school assistant went, but with the tuner again. And I was like, this was like half an hour later. And I was like, how was I supposed to remember the pitch from half an hour later? I guess it's for people that are perfect pitch, but grad school auditions, as I was saying to Julia, like job auditions, like with BCCO, when I just auditioned for the job with BCCO, not only is it an audition for them to find out the best candidate to work with the chorus, but it's also an opportunity for the candidates to know how the ensemble is as an organization. And so those that have really haphazard, unorganized, or disorganized application processes are probably going to approach things like that all the time. And so it's a little bit of a warning sign. And so, Julia had some lessons with the professors, and it's just like, yeah, you know what? You're going to be with that person for 2 years. You have to see the experiences. Are you going to be with a tester chorus that, one famously prestigious school that I was considering going to had a weekly session where they said, you have a weekly session with the chorus and you get to rehearse them and you get all this podium time. and it ended up being a chorus of all the conducting majors that were not voice majors. And there was like 5 people, and sometimes the chorus had 8 parts split between them, and you had to cover all those parts, and it was terrible. And so that wasn't a really rewarding experience week to week. And some other ones had almost professional choruses and orchestras that you worked with oftentimes. So I thought it would be a little bit interesting to talk about that because, it's a major transition, obviously, for Julia. And we're very excited that she's going off to grad school. And sorry that she can't conduct with us for the final performances of the year. But, I think the course's support for her over the past years has been absolutely inspiring. And of course, we know that she's going to do wonderfully. And we're excited to have her, go off into this next stage. And so I wanted to talk about a little bit about the transition just for that. Okay, speaking of transitions, I wanted to transition over to our instrumentalists, Rebecca Wishnia and Doug Mackes, who are fantastic instrumentalists. And as I mentioned, Doug has actually never played with us before in BCCO because he's a founding member and manager, I think, and cellist, most important part, of a quartet called the Friction Quartet. And Rebecca Wishnia is a fantastic player that plays with lots of different orchestras. And she actually went to study with the former music director for the San Francisco Ballet, Roy Milan, in the UC Santa Cruz. And so there's a connection there with the ballet. But they are engaged, they're fiancés, and as a result, they can play ensembles together, which is so amazing because that's one of the things I miss the most is being able to play together with people. I think we forget, I think one of the things that is, for me, sort of made me rethink everything about life is how much we take for granted how magical it is to communicate with each other non-verbally and to be able to connect with each other musically like this with other people playing in chamber music or playing or singing in a chorus where you're sitting side by side with people singing along with your part and to connect to them in that way, I think is something very special. And so with Rebecca and Doug, we're really excited because Rebecca's played with BCCO several times. And the fact that they're engaged and they can play together duets and they can play music is something very special. And so they've prepared a few works for us. And I'm going to give it over to them to introduce the pieces and to provide us with a little bit of musical connection, not only between themselves, but also obviously for all of us, even if it's virtually. So Rebecca and Doug, I'm going to give it over to you.
Good evening. So my name is Doug, and this is Rebecca, and we're very excited to be here playing for you this evening. We're going to be playing Glier, 8 pieces, and Glier is a lesser-known Russian composer from the early 20th century. And a little bit about myself, as Ming said, I play in a string quartet usually, and so I have a lot of experience playing with violins, but I don't have a lot of experience playing with just one violin on stage. Often in rehearsal, we'll break things down and I'll play a part with the violin, but there's something about being in a string quartet that feels very cozy and not too exposed. It's kind of the perfect balance for me of being a soloist and a chamber musician, but playing in a duo with one other instrument feels a lot more like being a soloist, so it's kind of a lot scarier, and the repertoire often has a lot more notes and is much more virtuosic, which can be a little bit intimidating. But we found a nice piece to play for you that's not too intimidating, but also very good.
Yeah, and it's kind of slim pickings, as Doug was saying, when it comes to duos. A lot of the stuff that's out there is very, very difficult, or it's by complete nobodies, and we tried a couple of pieces that just sort of were classically mediocre and fell flat on their faces. So we come to Glier, and I actually didn't know very much about him. This is only the second piece of his that I've ever played in my life. The first being what we call the Russian sailor's dance from the Red Poppy, you might know. It's like very famous piece. And so, yeah, the Red Poppy was his big hit of a ballet. And maybe for that reason, he was able to stay in the good graces of the Soviet leadership at the time. He died in the late 50s, but didn't have any of the difficulties that later composers like Shostakovich or Prokofiev had. And maybe also partly because his music was more conservative. But there are parts of this piece that remind me a little bit of the stuff that's to come in Prokofiev and some other composers that I like a lot.
So in duo for violin and cello repertoire, one of the issues that come up is the texture. Now, because there's only two of us, it makes it a little harder to fill out the texture in the harmony. Earlier, Ming was talking about how you have to be aware of if you're the first, third, or fifth note of the chord. Now, there's only two of us, so to have the first, third, and fifth note of the chord covered, often one of us has to be playing more than one note at a time, which is called a double stop or triple stop if you have three notes in the chord. Now, another option that often comes up is having an ostinato pattern like an arpeggio that repeats over and over again, like this. So that kind of solves the problem of filling out the harmony and the texture in the space.
But it can also be a lot more virtuosic and difficult to play. And there are some movements of this piece that I feel you can really tell that it's a struggle to properly fill out the accompaniment. But then on the other hand, there are movements like there's a gavotte in the middle of it, and I think that the kind of neo-Baroque nature of it helps with the texture because it's okay that it sounds a little bit more thin going back to the Baroque era.
So,
and we have 5 movements, I think. Is that right? 5.
Yeah, I think 5 movements.
All right.
Okay.
were able to do this because we don't have any concerts ever again in our life. Everything in my life has been canceled through eternity. So we're very glad that we were able to play something, even if it's just from our small apartment living room.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. We really appreciate you listening to us and giving us the opportunity to prepare something and perform again.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us. We miss you guys. Hope you're doing well. Thank you all. I think one of my favorite things about chamber music is that, most chamber music was done in situations like this, where well, not virtually, obviously, but in situations where you could actually see the people's faces. Like they had house concerts. You actually had concerts where you can, you were within 6 feet. Oh my God, 6 feet are social distancing. But you could see people's faces, and they weren't pieces for concert halls of 3,000 people, right? They were really for people when we had small gatherings of people in people's houses. And so, situations like this, where even though we're virtually, you can actually see people breathing. You can see the sort of the what I call the spidey senses of people feeling each other and connecting with each other musically. I think is really, really important. So thank you guys for joining us, especially Glier. Glier is one of my favorite composers because he wrote the most ludicrous pieces for the Soviet government. I think like one of his pieces was 1937, the 20th anniversary for the solemn occasion of the October Revolution. He was so famous for all these pieces for the government. And like Rebecca was saying, that he was the teacher of Prokofiev. And so, you could see the precursors of what music was going to be like when you had Shostakovich and Prokofiev that were still playing against the Soviet censors and whatnot. But Blair was very, very influential, even though some of his music is sort of lost today to being oddities that people don't really play anymore. But yeah, thank you so much for joining us, because it's a really a wonderful treat to have you be able to play music together. I miss people so much.
Nice.
And so hope you're doing well. And they're engaged, of course. Their wedding is in the summer, so we hope that things are better by then. But congratulations on that, and thank you for joining us.
You're welcome.
Okay, see you later. So we're going to switch gears to Paul, who's going to lead us out on our last session, of course. And he's going to play a work for us that he has prepared, but also lead us in a sing-along at the very end, too. So I'm going to hand it over to Paul.
Hey, everyone. Hope you can hear me okay. Christian, good? Okay. I got really curious about Arvo Pärt because, we'd been working on the Te Deum, and I realized I don't really know a whole lot about Arvo Pärt. So, I thought, I wonder if he did any piano music. So I looked it up, and he did. It turns out he wrote one piano piece, a very special piano piece that I'd like to play for you tonight. But before I do, I'd like to just speak a little bit about the piece. It was written in 1976, after a period of 8 years where Pärt did not write anything. And what happened was in 1968, his piece Credo was premiered in Tallinn, Estonia. And, because it had a religious theme, he was an Orthodox Christian, it was panned by the Soviet authorities, even though at the time the audience immediately asked for a second hearing of it. But it wasn't performed again, that I know of. And Pärt's music, as a form of punishment for having written such a piece, it wasn't performed much in the Soviet Union at all after that. So Pärt kind of went into compositional seclusion, call it. And the first piece that he came out with was this piano piece in 1976 called Für Alina, for Alina, which was the daughter of a friend of his who moved to England with her father. So it was like a consolation piece more than anything for the mother who missed her daughter. But it's in a style called tintinnabuli, which means little bells. And you'll understand what that's all about when you hear the piece. It's a very peculiar or very specific to Arvo Pärt. A few things about the way this piece is written. I'm going to put it up on my iPad here so you can just take a look at how the score looks. Can you see? Can see that it's very sparse writing. It's nothing but whole notes and single note heads. And there's a few peculiarities about the piece that you should know about. So it starts on this low B note here, and the pedal holds down for all but one moment in the whole piece. And then the rest of it I play up here. But the entire harmonic structure, like my left hand will only play parts of the B minor chord, B minor triads. And except there is one moment in the piece which I hope you'll hear where I'll play a C sharp, which makes for a very interesting change in color in the piece. It starts with one very long note, and then after that, it's one note head followed by a whole note. Then the next bar is two note heads with a whole note, then three, and so on until we get to 7 notes plus a whole note, and then it goes backwards. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. You'll hear all this. He had a very specific formula for how the harmony worked also. I told you it was in B minor. Which B minor note is played in the left hand is determined by what the right hand's playing. For instance, if I'm playing a C sharp or a D, I'd play the B. And if I were playing an E or an F sharp, the harmony note will be a D. And if I'm playing G, A, or G or A, F sharp will be the pitch underneath. So with all that explication, it's a very meditative piece. The marking is ruhig, erhaben, in sich hineinhorchend, which means peacefully, in an elevated and introspective manner. Interestingly, when I looked up hineinhorchend on its own, like out of this context, it said listen to your own inner voice. So that's, I guess, another way of saying introspective. So here we go, Für Alina by Arvo Pärt. So I hope some of the beauty of that piece was able to come through my my laptop microphone. I encourage you to go onto YouTube and listen to some of the recordings there because it's really beautiful. And you really hear a lot of the harmonics from the piano when you're right there in the room with it. So, you know, I'm sorry we couldn't do it in person, but, you know, maybe another time. So for something completely different, let's move on to our sing-along, which today will be Bill Withers, who, as many of you know, sadly passed away last week. So I thought it'd be a nice time to do a song called Lean on Me. And I see that Christian has got the lyrics up for you. And I see that I'm kind of on the side. I'm going to play a little bit of an introduction, and then you're all in. And at the end, we're going to all sing like a call me, call me. So we'll maybe do that 5 or 6 times, and then we'll finish it off. That's at the very end. And I really encourage you to let loose when we get to that moment. So here we go with Lean on Me by Bill Withers. Here we go, 2, 3, and sometimes in our lives we all have pain, we all have sorrow, but if we are wise, we know that there's always tomorrow. Lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. Please swallow your pride. If I have things you need to borrow, for no one can fill those of your needs that you don't let show. So just call on me, brother, when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. I just might have a problem that you'd understand. We all need somebody to lean on me when you're not strong, and I'll be your friend. I'll help you carry on, for it won't be long till I'm gonna need somebody to lean on. So just call on me, brother, when you need a hand. We all need somebody to lean on. I just might have a problem that you'd understand. We all need somebody to lean on. If there is a load you have to bear that you can't carry, I'm right up the road, and I'll share your load. If you just call me, call me. Yeah, call me, call me, call me, call me, call me, and last time call me.
Woo!
There we go. Thanks, y'all, for putting up with my singing.
Thanks, Paul. That was
Good
great.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everybody. Next week, we are going to obviously have Paul and Julie again, but we're going to have Jennifer Paulino And if you don't know Jennifer Paulino, she's a phenomenal soprano, and she's worked with the chorus in vocalises and exercises. Phenomenal voice teacher as well. But she sang, I think, the um, uh, Saint John Passion with us a while ago, back at the high school, actually, Berkeley High School.
We may have lost Ming's connection.
Oh no.
He's frozen in space and time, so maybe the thing to do is to sign off. And thanks everybody for joining, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah.
Same time.
Sounds
Bye.
good. Bye, everyone.
Goodbye. Have a great week.
Bye, everybody.
You too.